that we have the capacity to make this state work for all of its individuals, to make sure that our universities are competitive, to make sure that our children from P to 12 are getting a quality education that prepares them not only for college, but for jobs, so they can be, again, good citizens, good tax-paying citizens here in the state of Illinois. We know that we have not only the potential, but the capacity to do that. And as a consequence of that, we passed a $37.3 billion budget, which ensures that our schools will start on time, which ensures, in fact, that industries will come to Illinois and be here because we're a competitive state. We have made concessions to individuals that, one, had some outrageous concessions, but we made the difference by addressing those and meeting with those individuals to come up with what we know makes Illinois works, and that's a negotiated ending. So today, again, not only do I stand here with my friends, but I'm also have some other of our members who will comment on some of the particulars that we've done to move our state forward. And I believe we have Senator Andy Manar. Senator Manar.
Thank you, Senator Trotter. Andy Manar from the 48th District. I'm going to pick up where Senator Trotter left off. The Senate Democrats have acted responsibly over the past 5 months. If you recall, the first action that we took in January was to pass a measure to limit terms of leadership in the Senate. That was a first of its kind measure. We all took that vote, and that was the first step to where we have ended this session today. We've passed major bills that the governor has both asked for and demanded in some cases: procurement reform, workers' compensation reform, pension reform, local government consolidation, property tax relief as recently as yesterday, and of course education funding reform, which was the topic of the previous press conference and one that's probably coming right after us. Along with that, we have advanced a budget to the House that lives within the governor's spending limits that he put forward on February 15th in his budget address. He put forward a number of $37.3 billion as a measure of success. That was the governor's measure of success, and the Senate Democrats met his measure under his terms. We also cut $3 billion, which is not easy for us to do. We had many discussions, lively discussions in our caucus meetings about how to achieve both cuts and revenue and live within the governor's terms of spending. We achieved all of those things in our caucus. Those bills are pending today in the House of Representatives. So this session, led by everyone here and members that are not here who are on the floor right now, we have produced a result that we are quite proud of as a caucus. And we believe this is the best way to move forward as a state and address all of the things that we know we have to address in order to end this impasse and move beyond this situation that we're in today, 700 days today without a budget. This didn't just happen. Our appropriation committees, our revenue committee, we have worked week in and week out, as each of you know. We began by asking agency directors that have been appointed by Governor Rauner to help us in the exercise of cutting from the budget, not just the budget that he presented, but the budget that we're living under today, those spending limits. If you remember, we did not receive $1 of suggested cuts from the governor's agency directors, the people who are the experts on their agencies and what they spend their money on. That was an exercise that we went through in the Senate. Then we went back and we asked the same agency directors to go through the governor's spending numbers for FY18 and help us fill that gap, not just the larger issues we have to deal with, but that specific gap of $5.4 billion in the governor's introduced budget. Again, we were met with resistance from the agency directors. I recall Director Sheldon, who came before our committee and said he can't stand another dollar's worth of cuts to the Department of Children and Family Services. That's what we heard. So despite all of these things along the way where the governor was fighting us, where he was saying things to make us stop, promoting ideas that just aren't accurate, or even putting out half-truths, I would go as far as to say as lies about what we've done in the Senate. We acted responsibly. Those measures are pending today in the House of Representatives. Senator Steens.
Thanks, Senator Menard and Leader Trotter. So I'm just going to fill in a little bit more detail. What you have over here is just a visual, simple visual that shows what we did versus what the governor's office had suggested we do back in February. When he introduced his budget, page 30 of his budget book, $37.3 billion in spending, as Senator Menard noted. We lived within that. He had an unbalanced budget, though. We have now filled that in to actually come up with a surplus. And we did that by actually implementing bills that help achieve reductions in spending, the pension reform bill, local government consolidation bill, procurement reform bill, and we made a lot of cuts to specific line items to help achieve spending reductions. And then we actually also passed a revenue bill that helps fill in the needed revenues to balance. We've all known all along we're going to have to deal with both sides of the ledger, revenues and spending, to actually come up with a balanced budget. I today really urge the duelers here to put down their swords and come to the table and negotiate in good faith. We, the Senate, have done this. We have done it with the support and help of Republicans in the Senate. The Brady Group, or Brady Bunch, has met at least 15 times. The budget that we passed is not a Democratic value budget entirely, the way we would do it. It clearly reflects priorities in the way Republicans would want to go about developing a budget. That's why we lived within the governor's spending limits that he had proposed, and that's why the revenue, as you're going to hear from Senator Hutchinson in a moment, lives within the spending and new revenues that they had negotiated with us at the table. We now need the governor and the House to join in and get a balanced budget. We have been doing the responsible thing in the Senate. I know it's easy to lump us all into the same group of ineffectual, we haven't gotten our jobs done. Well, we in the Senate did do our jobs. We stood up, we passed a balanced budget. We now need everyone to step up and do their jobs and do this for the state of Illinois. Too many folks out there, I mean, this to me is heartbreaking. I've been trying to keep it together all day long because I know when we don't do this, what happens out there across the state in terms of universities laying off. We've heard today about 2 more universities doing huge layoffs, kids who are not going to be able to go to school next year because their universities can't possibly keep the MAP grants going for them. All the social service agencies that are laying off, domestic violence shelters have not gotten paid for a year. Story after story, we all know it. We need to do our jobs. Everyone needs to help the Senate fill in and be the responsible folks. We're not alone being the responsible folks in the room. Thank you, and I want Senator Hutchinson to come up.
Hi, everybody. So I had the wonderful task of trying to negotiate the one thing nobody likes to talk about, but everyone treated like it was our big win. It was always proffered that, if we do the reforms the governor wants, we'll give you the tax increase that the Democrats want. That in and of itself was not true. That's not the win. The win is the stabilization of the state. And it's not like anybody takes a revenue vote lightly or easily, especially not with the way people feel about taxes in and of themselves. It's one of the hardest things to do. So when we talked about what kind of a revenue package we would come together, and we also knew at the end of the day that we couldn't say we had passed a full, responsible, balanced budget without dealing with the revenue side of the equation. And we as a caucus stepped up and did that as hard as it was. And part of the reason why that Senate Bill 9 didn't hit the board until May is because we worked from January through May to try to figure out where people stood, where we could get votes, how we could put, cobble something together that did reflect the things that we all hold dear in this caucus. And even after that, after we used the income tax rate that the Republicans demanded, after we used the number that they laid out, that the governor laid out in his own budget address, after we spent months and months and months and untold amounts of hours actually sitting in rooms with people to have these hard conversations, only to get a letter the very next day from their very own budget director saying that they didn't participate and they didn't have anything to do with this and this is all the Democrats. At the end of the day, we knew, and I said this in my closing, that we don't have very much more time, that this is, every time they would say we need more time, we need more time, we need more time, we kept pointing to the fact that the clock was running out. They were just running down the clock. And what we know in our caucus is that it is much easier to stand up and demand and argue for things when everyone loves you. It is much harder to do it when you have to do it and everyone's not going to love you. This is not the easy part of governing, but this is the necessary part of governing. And we stand very firm and extremely proud of the fact that we did what we believe to be the right thing, which was pass a fully funded budget in all of its parts that addresses all of the areas that we've heard about for 2 years now. So it's one thing to yell and scream about taxes. It's another thing to argue about what those taxes pay for, and to have all 7 of our universities downgraded on one day, to see 47,000 kids lose their child care, to have all of our social services running on threads, struggling to get by. We can go story after story after story, but end of the day, what we know is that the cost of chaos is something you can't manage. And this is what this state is right now. We are all trying to manage chaos. Time's up.
Are there any questions?
What do you make of the speaker's comments for why he's not doing a budget today, being that his members are concerned about how Republicans negotiate with you all in this room?
Well, I didn't hear the comments, but you just repeated them, I suppose. But I can't elaborate on that. We were elected by our constituents, the same people they were. We know that our constituents told us that they wanted us to do our job, and our job is to have a balanced budget which allows for those things to enhance their quality of life. So I can't comment on why he's taking this let's wait posture when the work needs to be done today, because we've already waited too long.
Senator, it seems to me as an outsider that you all have moved and probably made a number of compromises that at the beginning of this process, a lot of you didn't think you would be making. Have you talked to the governor, and at what point do you say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good? I mean, this is the best we can do.
That's been said. I mean, every little parable, analogy from, the sky is falling you can think of has happened. So those comments have been made. Leader Harmon.
Look, there's a price to leadership. It is not a difficult thing, but we've done our job. It's time for the governor to do his job. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting for the governor to do his job, and all he does is campaign. It's time to govern.
Senator Menard, you mentioned that you felt like there was the governor was stepping in during your months of negotiation and kind of meddling, and you said he even put out some flies. Could you elaborate on that process and what happened?
No, I don't. Let me be clear. I didn't. He did. I didn't. I don't. It's not a feel like. It's. He did it. Even as recently as today, the statement that came from the governor's office about Representative Davis's amendment that's pending in the House is completely inaccurate. I don't know who wrote it, but they need to reread the bill, and they need to make a different decision about whether or not to put out accurate information or inaccurate information that I would say is deliberate to kill progress. So, we could talk about this one for a long time. We've been at this now for 2 years. This caucus has passed 3 bills to end the system in Illinois. 3 bills. And it was tough to do that. It was tough. This caucus has led on the issue. Every step of the way, this session, the governor has repeatedly tried to deny progress on something that he claims is the most important thing to him, which is equity in public school funding. his actions and his words don't match.
But so like in the meantime, over the past few months, you know, when we've been talking to him, he's been saying the Senate, I believe they're working in good faith, they're making progress, things are going well, we're very close, so.
Does that match the robocalls? Does that match the robocalls? So it's one thing, again, we were lavished praise during the budget address about how we wanted the Senate to keep working and how this, please continue to do your work. So we continued to do our work. It was literally every week we were met back in the district with all they want to do is raise your taxes. They don't want to vote on any reforms. Didn't matter what reform we passed. If it wasn't exactly the way he wanted it, as if we don't have a negotiation process in the Capitol, if it wasn't exactly the way he wanted it, then we did nothing. That all they want to do is raise your taxes. Nothing could have been further from the truth. And that lasted the entire 5 months. If you remember this time, right now we're hearing, we will not get a signature unless I get comprehensive tax relief. Or property tax relief. And this time last year, it was fair maps and term limits. So at every turn, we hear something in the building, but then what we get at home and in our districts, which makes it incredibly difficult to do your job and respond to your constituencies, when the messages are always conflicting. And then we're chastised for not listening to campaign stuff, because that's different. People say things in the campaign all the time. But we're supposed to believe what we hear in the building. Well, which part are we, when you make a public statement, which one are we supposed to believe? The one thing we do know is that when you want, if the goal is to get a budget, if the goal really is to get a budget, we'd have one.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.